Welcome to a deep dive into 19th century New York City. You've given us a fascinating piece to look at.
Oh, is this something interesting?
A single page from the New York Times from October 25th, 1854. But, there's a catch, I guess you could say.
A catch. Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's not a typical news article, you see.
Oh, so what is it then?
It's more like a jumble of snippets. Like someone took scissors to a bunch of different stories, ads, you name it, and then, I don't know, glued them all back together randomly.
Wow, it's like a Frankenstein's monster of a newspaper page. What would even be the point of creating something like that?
Well, that's what we're here to figure out, right? It's like a snapshot of the city's information overload, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I can see that. Just bombarded with all these bits and pieces. Imagine trying to make sense of it all.
Exactly. So our mission today is to decode this page. What can this fragmented puzzle tell us about what it was like to live in New York back then?
Where do we even begin with something like this?
Well, one thing that kind of jumps out at me is, well, the sheer volume of advertisements.
Oh, yeah, I see that. They're everywhere.
It seems like everyone was vying for the attention of New Yorkers, kind of like a 19th century version of Times Square, maybe.
I like that.
So let's dive into some of these ads. We've got, the usual suspects, I guess you could say.
That like,
Clothing, furniture, pianos. But then there's this ad for, and get this, fire and burglar-proof safes.
ooh, that's a bit intense.
Right. It speaks to, I don't know, like a sense of unease lurking beneath all the excitement of the city's booming economy.
Yeah, I get that. Imagine you finally made it. You're a successful merchant. You've got a nice home with lots of beautiful things. But then you realize those things make you a target.
Makes you think twice about success, huh?
Yeah, and remember, newspapers back then were full of stories about robberies and fires.
Oh, I bet. Especially in those newly developing neighborhoods, right?
Exactly. So while there was all this opportunity, there was also this fear. This fear of losing everything.
It's like a dark side to the American dream.
I think that's a good way to put it.
And speaking of anxieties, look at this. There's also an ad here for patent medicine. It claims to cure nervous stability, or whatever that is.
Nervous stability. Oh, yes. That was a catch-all term for everything from like anxiety, depression to, insomnia.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
And you have to remember, this is, before modern medicine, people were desperate for any solution to their problems. And these ads really preyed on those fears,
I can imagine. Makes you wonder, what were people back then so stressed about?
It's a good question, isn't it?
Maybe just trying to keep up in a city that never sleeps, as they say. And speaking of keeping up, the language in these ads is fascinating to me. It's all very dramatic.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, look, splendid assortment, richest description of goods.
Interesting. I guess they're not just selling products.
What do you mean?
It's like they're selling a lifestyle, This suggests a growing middle class with some money to spend and a desire to, project an image of success.
Yeah, I can see that.
If you buy this fine shirt for $1, you're basically telling the world, hey, look at me, I've arrived.
So are you saying fashion was just as important back then as it is today?
Maybe even more so. It was all about showing off.
Wow. Okay, well, let's move from what people were buying to how they were getting around.
Okay.
I'm noticing tons of mentions of, railroads and steamboats.
Ah, yes. We're in the middle of a transportation revolution, and New York is at the heart of it. These new technologies are connecting different parts of the city, opening up travel to distant locations. It's changing everything.
This page has got it all. We've got a steamboat line running all the way to Charleston, railroads connecting Brooklyn to Long Island, even a route from St. Louis to Alton.
It's like they're shrinking the country with all these new routes.
I know. Look at this ad. It boasts about this fast train to Hannibal, Missouri. That's right on the Mississippi River, a gateway to the West.
Oh, wow, you're right. This shows how westward expansion is fueling the demand for, faster and more efficient travel.
It's fascinating how intertwined geography and technology are, but all this progress doesn't erase the social problems that plagued, 19th century cities, right?
I'm afraid not.
There are some unsettling snippets on this page hinting at a much darker side of New York.
What have you found?
Well, take this short piece about a woman found lying in the street, senseless and still with wounds upon her head of the size of a man's hand. It's a stark reminder that, not everyone benefited equally from the city's progress.
It's true. And it's disturbing how casually it's mentioned, almost like violence was just part of everyday life.
Right. And there's more. A reward offered for a runaway mulatto boy and legal notices for lawsuits. It's a city full of disputes and conflicts.
This points to the social and economic disparities of the time. Poverty, racial tensions, the challenges of rapid urbanization. All these issues were simmering beneath the surface of this booming metropolis.
So even with all the excitement and opportunity, there's this underlying sense of danger and injustice.
Yes, I agree. It's a reminder that progress often comes at a cost.
But let's not forget about entertainment. There's an advertisement for Christie's Minstrels.
Oh, Christie's Minstrels. They were wildly popular at the time, but they relied on, well, how to say it, racist caricatures of African Americans for their performances.
Yeah. It's a stark reminder of how deeply ingrained racism was in American society, even in a city as diverse as New York.
A real contradiction.
And it's mentioned right alongside, well, the Greek slave, which I think refers to the famous statue by Hiram Powers. It's like they're presenting these two things as equally valid forms of entertainment.
And that speaks to the complex cultural landscape of New York at the time. You've got highbrow art and popular entertainment. You've got intellectual discussions and racist performances, all existing side by side.
It's a lot to process.
It really is.
Even for us. And we have the benefit of hindsight. Imagine trying to navigate this world back in 1854 with all its contradictions and complexities, with only this, well, jumble of information to guide you.
It would be overwhelming, to say the least.
This single page truly captures the dynamism and the chaos of New York City on the cusp of, major change. There's so much more to unpack here, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely.
But for now, let's take a moment to absorb all this information. We'll be right back with more of your deep dive into 19th century New York.
Welcome back to our deep dive, everybody. We've been digging into your 1854 New York Times page, and wow, it's already given us so much. The commerce, the anxieties of city life, the stark contrasts. It's all right here. Yeah, and we can't forget about the entertainment scene. We talked about Christie's Minstrels, but look, there's another ad here that offers something completely different. It's for the North American Review.
Yeah, that's not exactly, light reading. It was known for its serious, articles on all sorts of things, politics, philosophy, all those intellectual topics.
Right. So while some New Yorkers were taking in a minstrel show, others were diving into, some pretty complex debates about the issues of the day.
It's like we're seeing two sides of the same coin here. On one hand, you've got the rise of popular entertainment for the masses, and on the other, you've got this continued thirst for knowledge and, well, intellectual discussion among the, I guess you could say, city's elite.
The fascinating thing is that both were happening in New York at the same time.
It really speaks to the city's ability to, embrace a wide range of interests and activities, highbrow, lowbrow. It's all there.
That's what makes 19th century New York so fascinating, I think. This blend of, well, highbrow and lowbrow, commercial and intellectual, all mixed together.
I agree. And let's not forget about the city itself. I mean, look at this. The page mentions all these specific street names. Pearl Street, Broadway, Cedar Street, John Street.
These aren't just random details. They give us clues about, well, the layout and the character of the city.
Oh, interesting. What do you mean?
Well, take Pearl Street, for example. That was like the center of the city's booming commercial district. Imagine it just, bustling with merchants, shoppers, and the clatter of those horse-drawn carts everywhere.
I can picture it. What about Broadway? That's still a huge street today.
Yeah, Broadway was already becoming a major thoroughfare back then, known for its theaters and shops.
So it's like each street had its own personality, its own purpose. It's still like that in a way, isn't it?
Absolutely. And if we could walk those streets today, I bet we'd see this mix of residences, businesses, maybe even some public spaces.
Yeah. You can almost feel the energy, the constant movement of people and goods.
Try to imagine it. The cobblestone streets, the rumble of carriages, the shouts of the street vendors.
Oh, and the smells too, right?
Exactly. The smells. Think about it. The aroma of freshly baked bread, the scent of horses, the salty tang of the harbor.
It must have been sensory overload.
It really makes you realize how much we rely on our senses to understand the past. We can read about it in books, but to truly connect with it, we need to imagine what it felt like, sounded like, even smelled like.
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in those big events and dates, but it's the little details, the sensory experiences that really bring history to life.
Yeah, I think so too. So, okay, we've talked about the commerce, the transportation, the, the anxieties, the entertainment, even the smells of the city. What else can we find in this page, I wonder?
Well, there are a few legal notices scattered throughout. They might seem boring at first glance, but I don't know, I think they offer a little glimpse into, like, the legal and social structures of the time.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like, here's a notice for a divorce case. It reminds us that even though divorce was a lot less common back then, it was still a reality for some New Yorkers. And look, here's a notice for a bankruptcy case. It shows that, financial risk was always present, even during, well, a time of economic boom.
Hmm. So it's like these legal notices are these tiny cracks in the surface,
Revealing the complexities and contradictions of life in this rapidly changing city.
history isn't just about, kings and queens or battles. It's about the everyday lives of ordinary people, their struggles and triumphs, their legal disputes, their financial woes.
And those legal disputes, they often involve things like property, contracts, inheritance,
Right.
all of which tells us something about, the economic and social values of the time.
Exactly. These legal notices, even though they're brief and, seemingly insignificant, they give us a peek into the legal framework that shaped people's lives back then, how they interacted, all that.
It's incredible how much we've learned from this, one page. It's like a historical treasure map, leading us to all these unexpected discoveries about 19th century New York.
And that's the power of these primary sources.
Yeah.
They offer this direct connection to the past, unfiltered by later interpretations. It's amazing.
Yeah, you really see the world through the eyes of the people who lived it, hear their voices, understand their experiences.
I know, right?
Okay, so before we wrap up this part, there's one more snippet I can't resist mentioning.
Go for it.
It's a small ad for a book called The History of the Buccaneers of America.
Ah, yes. Even in the midst of this bustling metropolis, there's still that allure of, adventure and escapism.
Right.
Makes you wonder what other stories, both real and imagined, were captivating New Yorkers back then.
Oh, yeah. Like, what books were they reading? What plays were they watching? What were the hot topics of conversation at the dinner table?
Good questions.
It seems like we're only, scratching the surface here.
You're right. This page is just one tiny fragment of a much larger and more complex story. But it's a story that we can keep exploring, uncover it piece by piece, as long as we're, willing to look closely and listen carefully.
I like how you put that. So this has been an incredible journey so far. Thanks to you for sharing the source. But before we completely finish our deep dive into your 1854 New York Times page, let's take one last look and see if we've missed anything. We'll be back in a moment with our final thoughts.
We're back for one last look at your 1854 New York Times page. It's amazing how this one single page has shown us so much about New York City. The commerce, the anxieties, the cultural contrasts. It's all here.
Yeah, it's all here. But there's something, I don't know, like a sense of individual stories that we're missing,
What do you mean?
Like we see hints of them, the legal notices, the runaway ad, the woman found injured. These are glimpses into lives happening in the middle of all this change. I see what you mean. It's like we're looking at a tapestry. We can see the overall pattern, how it was made, but each individual thread has its own story.
I like that. A tapestry. It makes me wonder, about the people behind this very page, the ones who actually made it.
Who, like?
The printers, the typesetters, the editors. What were their working conditions like? What stories would they tell if we could talk to them?
Yeah. What about those newsboys? The ones who sold this paper on the street corner.
I know, right?
Can you imagine just weaving through the city's crowded streets, hawking the latest news? I wonder, did they ever stop to actually read the snippets they were selling? Or were they too busy trying to make a living?
Those are questions we might never, know the answer to.
Probably not.
But by asking those questions, it makes us remember. History is made up of so many countless individual stories. Each one is a thread in that tapestry you talked about.
That's true. It's a good reminder. Even something, I don't know, something seemingly insignificant, like this one piece of paper. It can hold a whole universe of human experience.
Exactly. It makes you appreciate these primary sources, doesn't it?
I think so. Makes you think about things differently.
They challenge us. They make us look beyond what's right there on the surface, to imagine those lives, those stories that might be hidden within the historical record.
And they remind us that history isn't just, dates and events. It's about people.
Exactly.
Well, thanks to you for sharing this incredible piece of history with us. This deep dive has given me, and I hope all our listeners, a much richer understanding of what New York City was like in 1854. It was dynamic, complex, full of contradictions, a city on the edge of major change.
It really was. And for all our listeners out there, we want to leave you with this. Take a moment and think about the objects and documents around you, those everyday things that fill your life, and ask yourself, what stories did they tell about this time, this place? What will they tell future generations who might find them one day? The ones who will be trying to understand you and how you lived.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. We'll see you next